A show that tackles the big issues affecting the BVI and the rest of the Caribbean. Searches for answers to today's big questions and gives viewers a unique perspective on developing stories. Follow the big story with me, Kathy Richards, only on GTV. This show is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, Cyril B. Ramney Turtola Pier Park, NV Salon, Nail Spa and Barbershop, Tisley Cross Deliciously Smooth Cider, and Digicel, simply more speed, reliability and entertainment.
Plug into Digicel Plus and get even more entertainment with Disney Plus included. The best of Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and National Geographic all in one place. Whenever you want, plug into Plus to enjoy Disney Plus and much more with a home fiber bundle. Sign up today. Digicel Plus.
This is The Big Story. I'm Kathy Richards. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition. On set is someone who is definitely not a stranger to The Big Story, Bishop John Ivan Cline. I want to welcome you to the set again. It's been a little while, but I think this one was deliberate, you know, because of the hot topic that you really are so burning up to talk about, but you know, in respect of a family and of what some people thought to be a solemn moment, we did not proceed. But you're here today, but before we go there, how are you doing? What's happening?
I am doing well.
How you see your country running?
The country is stagnated. We are at I wouldn't even say a snail's pace. There's no movement. We're just marking time in place. So we're not moving. As from where I sit, there is some operation to keep it running and keep the things running and the offices open. But in terms of progress, we are not progressing. And of course, largely because after the COI and then of course the demise of our premier, and then the implementation of the COI recommendations
under a new, almost first time
legislators and this new government. I don't know if we can expect a whole lot, but I think we can do better. But hopefully there's an election coming, and with the coming election, the people will elect a cohort of politicians that can lead the country forward, that have the courage, the know-how, and the fortitude to take the country from where it is, because we need to go forward. We cannot go back. We don't have a choice but to move forward. The UK would like nothing better than to see us regress in some form or another, that they can maintain a certain level of control over these islands.
Why do you strongly feel about that?
I strongly feel about it because a leopard doesn't change its spots. That's how the UK, that's how they've operated everywhere they have gone around the world. If they can't control it, they will try to destroy it. They have not helped, especially colonies with people of color, to advance. You had to fight them. And if you go to Africa, you will see they have not helped Nigeria to advance. They have not helped Kenya to advance. They have not helped Uganda to advance. They have not helped any of their former colonies to advance. If you go to Guyana, your own country, they have not helped Guyana to advance. And these are countries with vast resources. They have not helped to build their infrastructure, strengthen their processes politically, you know, put them on a more modern footing. They have not helped. They want to give you enough that you will never rise above them, and they can always say they're helping, but they're spoon feeding you, when really what you need is a shovel. You need a backhoe full of help, and they're giving you spoon feeding. But it's their way of controlling the narrative, and even though you can say they're former colonies, in a way, we are still colonized by the British. And I feel very strongly about it, because we keep looking to our oppressor to set us free, and your oppressor don't set you free.
We'll come back to that particular statement there, but to go back to what you would have said there prior, if it is that they never change their stripe, or if the stripe never takes a blanket for a moment, one would want to argue, if that was the case so hard and fast, they would not have come to an agreement to say, let's implement those recommendations. They would have gone with the first one, which says temporarily, partially suspend the Constitution of the Virgin Islands and do what they wish. But they have not done that.
They have not done that because they know that there will be a tremendous lashback from the international community. There will be tremendous pushback from within the BVI, of which I will be to the front of the line. There will be far-reaching outcry and consequences if they take that position. So instead of helping in any significant way, they use it as a stick over your head and say, do this, so we can rule you indirectly without suspending your Constitution. Because now we have to do what you say because we have this stick.
But they didn't feel that way when they suspended in the Turks and Caicos?
They didn't feel that way because really and truly the majority of the Turks and Caicos people wanted the British to suspend their Constitution at that time. It's only 2 years later, when they realized what was going on, they started pushing back. And they actually took to the streets to march for an election. They weren't happy with what the British had done after they took over. They wanted them at the beginning because they felt that there was widespread corruption in their political tier, but they weren't happy with it after. And they know that that would not go down the same here, because we were already taken to the streets and say, we don't want this. We have problems, let's fix them. And if you want to help us fix them.
And we saw that the governor put out the first of his review. You had a chance to go through it?
I haven't had a chance to go through it myself, to tell you the truth. But I did see it. I do have it in my inbox to go through and see what it is. And Kathy, I think we've always said some of the recommendations that the British made, that was made by Sir Gary Hickenbotham, are necessary for our advancement as a territory.
And that are ones that we were seing even before those recommendations were put in ink and paper.
Exactly. They are necessary, and we welcome them. What we do not welcome is the pressure that comes along with it without the help necessary. And I've said this on this show many times, where we're looking for a partner, not a police. And what they have done is taken the position of a policing the territory instead of partnering, creating a modern partnership with the territory. And the governor, who's responsible for the civil servants, I believe have been derelict in his duties in helping to strengthen the civil servants, strengthen processes, streamline areas where we can find better efficiency and effectiveness in the civil service. That is part of your remit. Why aren't you not doing it?
And before we go to the core of our planned discourse for today, you mentioned that elections is coming soon, and you would hope that the electorate would choose people who best suits the position. But there is the fear that there might not be elections at the constituted time. Do you share that?
Well, there is that fear because you are not hearing anything. And if an election is supposed to be held, I think the latest June or somewhere around that time.
I think it's May, 20-something of May, 26 or so of May.
By now, you should have heard something. And I hope
something from whom?
Something from the government, because they're the ones in concert with the governor who sets the date for the next election.
But they've been constantly saying that, you know, elections will happen within the constituted time.
It's not enough. They need to set a date.
This early?
That's how people plan. That's how parties get themselves together and plan, and persons can now decide whether I want to be a part of this process, the electoral process, as a candidate or as a voter. I believe a date needs to be forthcoming.
When a date is set, I don't recall if that's the case, but when a date is announced, is not that time that the legislative house is dissolved?
No, I not to my knowledge. I don't think it's resolved that soon. I think it has to be dissolved
within a certain frame time of the elections.
Yes.
Okay, yes, that's true. All right, so let's go to the heated part. During all of this, while implementing recommendations and the formation of a new government, which sees parties coming together to make a unity government, we also would have seen the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. I contacted you at that time for a comment and to see, you know, your thoughts about this, but you thought it best to leave it until her funeral would have passed and the dust would have settled and families of hers have begun to move on, and now we're sitting with a king. That's King Charles III.
Yeah.
You have very strong views as opposed to what some others would have been sharing. And I want you to be very candid, as you usually are, on your thoughts on mainly the observance, the celebration, and all that went on in honor of her passing. Start from the beginning.
Strong, very, very strong. And like I said, respectfully. Because the Bible does say you respect those in authority. So respectfully, I withheld any comment on the Queen's passing, whether good or bad or indifferent. I didn't show up to anything. But truly...
You didn't show up to anything?
No, because for me, it would be disingenuous of me to participate in ceremonies that I feel is contradictory to my stand and my belief. My tongue is getting tired.
That's okay.
But when I look at the history of the British around the world, and over the last 70 years when the Queen has been in power, and some of the atrocities around the world that has been done under her watch, it's very hard for me to celebrate the death of someone whose father, whose foreparents have presided over such genocide and murder and theft from countries with rich resources around the world, especially Africa. And if you go to India, and what they have done to India with the East Indian Company, and how they enslaved the Indian people, how they took, just ripped resources out of these lands. But not only that, the human casualty, the blood, the murder that was left in the wake, and they presided over these atrocities. And there's no way that I can celebrate a country and a monarchy whose fame and power and wealth is gotten by stolen goods and murder.
But if I'm to interject there, you would have alluded to her mom and her dad, who would have presided over these mass genocides and atrocity against humankind in parts of the world. But there is the voice on the other side of the thing. That's not who Queen Elizabeth II was. She was a wonderful woman, a woman who showed heart to people.
How? That would be my question. How did she do that?
But how did she not, in your view?
She did not, because there's nothing that showed me she ever went back to these countries that were so negatively impact generations, to right some of the wrongs that were committed by her parents, and some of which she presided over. She's not absolved from this at all. She presided over some of it 70 years in yesterday. She didn't come to power in the last 4 years when she became this nice old lady. No, she was in there when Africa and Africans were being really put under a lot of inhuman conditions, held behind fence, put in camps, in work camps, without proper food, while they are raping from the land, taking the gold, taking the diamonds, taking it happened in South Africa, it happened in Ghana, it happened in Tanzania, it happened in Nigeria, it happened in Kenya, it's happening in Guyana. You want me to celebrate? It's like somebody coming into my house, raping my wife and daughters, killing my sons, and then they go off with all the spoils, and then 20 years later they said they found salvation and I must forgive them because all of a sudden they turn to be good people. But doesn't work like that.
But on the other side, you know, times have evolved. People have grown. People are bolder now. If this is what we see as we're calling rape this country of its wealth and is still doing this, to an extent, don't you feel that the people are to be blamed for allowing this to continuously happen?
In a sense, leadership, not just the fellowship, but more importantly, the leadership. And simply because if you keep being beholden to your oppressor and not call them out for who they are, then you will ever be in their clutch. But the problem that they face, and give these leaders some credit, because they have seen what has happened to those who come up against the British Empire.
What are some of these things that happen?
They kill them, they take them out.
But
they're dead.
Those are decades ago.
No, that ain't decades ago. They are modern day. Let me give you an example with Idi Amin in Uganda. The British were who brought Idi Amin to power, because the guy before Idi Amin was not going along with the British agenda. Idi Amin came to power and he went along with the British. He was invited, he was on British Council, he was part of the East African Union and so on and so forth, well promoted by the British. Idi Amin's demise was when he started renaming landmarks in Uganda that carried British names. The most famous that still retained their name because they didn't want to let that go was Lake Victoria. It is the second largest lake in the world. When Idi Amin started going into that direction, they labeled him as a cannibal, as a terrorist, as a dictator. You were the one who put him there. You know what he was. And I'm not saying he was the best of man, but as long as he was your man, he could do what he wanted. From the time he started renaming Ugandan landmarks back to their original name, then is when the British turned against Idi Amin and ran him out of Uganda. The guy that came after Idi Amin, Obuti, was more brutal than Idi Amin. But the British sanctioned him being there because guess what? He allowed Lake Victoria, which Lake Victoria is the head of the Nile River. All right, the Nile River is the only river that flows from down up up to Egypt. And when they were allowed to keep that name as Lake Victoria, they were okay with that. But they have done nothing to help the human condition in Uganda. The Ugandan shilling is still 3,800 today. It's 3,800 to 1. When Uganda has resources, but yet they would marginalize those people. The French, this is what the French did to Haiti. After Haiti won the war against the French, led by Toussaint, Olivier, that's his name, right? They marginalized. They got every nation, all the G7 nations to stack against Haiti. Do not trade with them. Cut off all trade. Cut off all aid. Cut off all support. Because we will make you pay for centuries to come. That is what they do. And it's the current government, not yonder, it's the current government that perpetrate these behaviors still. When they couldn't control Cuba, they embargo Cuba. Whatever they can't control, they destroy. When we speak about the British and the way they operate and why we still allow it to continue, it is because when you realize the consequences of standing against the Brits, you are very cautious of how you approach. So unless you're an independent country and you can gain that independence in some kind of amicable way without it being acrimonious, because if you are, they have the power to get France on their side, they have the power to get Germany on their side, they have the power to get Spain on their side, and literally create an embargo against your country that you get no help. And that's what they do. They did it to Cuba, they did it to Haiti. So we have examples in the Caribbean. The rest of the people, like Guyana, they just devalue your currency. So that they can take your resources at the least possible price possible. They're selling it for millions of dollars on the market, and they're buying it to you for pennies on the dollar. As a matter of fact, less than pennies on the dollar. Because if you do a Guyanese dollar 200 to 1, you get less than a penny, you know, for a Guyanese dollar. So that's what they do. That's what they do in Tanzania, $2,000 to 1. That's what they do in Malawi, $1,000 to 1. It's economic warfare. So you cannot tell me that it is because of some policy that the IMF or the World Bank has put in place that caused these countries to be so indebted that their currency is not better than it is. There's no country on the planet that has more debt than America. But yet, every other world currency is pegged against the US dollar when their dollar is worth little or nothing because it's a fiat currency. And the only thing they have going for them that keeps them alive is they have the ability to print money.
To go back to the core of our discourse, during that period of mourning for the Queen, what we would have seen and heard from sister Caribbean countries, from our mother countries and those afar, is this great resistance of what felt to them like they were being forced to honor and to pray, make sacrosanct of the death of the Queen. We saw those, the platforms were saturated with this level of disdain, this level of rejection. And you seem to be in agreement with those.
I'm in agreement because I know the history of the British. It's only people who don't know the history of what the British Empire has done around the world, the atrocities that they have committed in the name of God and the name of country, that can stand. There are even British citizens who who are just as irate about the celebration that has gone on, the billions of dollars that were spent on this funeral, when hungry children in the countries you raped still can't have one meal per day. But you can spend $9 billion on a funeral. And then you want to say you are a citizen of the world. When you own so much resource in gold and diamond in your treasury, that all you're going to do is pass down to the remaining 6 or 7 siblings that you have, while millions of children around the world, in India and Africa, who you've colonized, whose resources you have taken, are left to struggle, and all it takes to feed them is about $5 to $10 per day for a family. It doesn't add up for me, and I can't celebrate that. Not as a child of God, not as one who believes in Jesus Christ, who teach us to take care of the widow and the homeless and the orphans. They're not doing that.
Is that the driving force behind your continuous mission to the African countries, helping the people there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because these are not bad people. They're not wicked people. They are naive in some way and have been brainwashed. I had a friend of mine from Tanzania, and when I was on the Serengeti visiting, and I told her yesterday I was a pastor, so she sent me this picture of her. She's a Catholic, and she sent me this picture of her standing next to this nice frame, big picture with a white Mary. So I said to her, being devil's advocate, well, not devil, I don't advocate for the devil, just being malicious, who's the white woman in the picture? She said, it's the mother of Jesus. I said she didn't look like that. But that is what you get. When they see Caucasians, they see almost like they see their savior. Somebody's coming to help them. When they see people like me, it takes a little time for them to gravitate, because they see poverty when they see me.
Because they see themselves.
Because they see themselves. So it doesn't equate that I could be in any way prosperous. As a matter of fact, one of the young ladies we bought from Africa, and this is a true story, true story, that when she got to my house and we had Sunday lunch after their first Sunday of being here, and she turned to her adopted mother, Dr. Sylvia Simmons, and she asked her, is he really black? Dr. Simmons said, ask him. And she was just smiling shy. And she said, I said, ask me what you want to ask me. She said, are you black? Because she could not equate the level of living with my skin color. I'm blacker than the girl.
I know, I remember there were 2 girls, right?
Yes.
There were 2, yes, I remember.
So you have that still mentality in Africa. So part of my being there is to change that whole mindset, that they might come and give you a hand out, but they will not change your condition. I am here to give you a hand up, because I'm intending to change your situation. Not just give you $1 and leave you in the same situation I found you, just to make myself feel good. No, that's what Caucasians do when they go to Africa. Most of them, not all of them. They don't leave the people in any better condition than they met them. They just give them a meal, take a nice picture, say we're feeding children, so help send money. They don't give them an education. That's why I go to Africa and build schools. I don't build churches in Africa, because the mentality of the pastors is that they shouldn't work, because somebody told them in the Bible, say a pastor shouldn't work. I said, how you think I get money to come here? waiting for church people to give me money. You gotta work. Paul himself said, with my own 2 hands, I have sustained myself and those with me. So it's changed that whole dynamic, that whole mindset, that even though we appreciate the help, some of the lighter pigmentation we do appreciate, they don't leave them in a better condition. They don't.
So, Bishop, in all of this, because what you're talking about and to your own testimony are things that have been happening from century to century to century. What can be those redeeming moves now? What can take us out from that place that we are now in terms of the relationship with the powers of the United Kingdom and those with them?
I don't know if there's anything we can do except to pull ourselves away from them and build our own society strong, robust, corruption-free, crime-free, and let them see that we could do this if you just cut us loose. We can build a more, what the American call it, a greater union or whatever they say. We can build that kind of BVI. In terms of them making any move towards us to help us, we're not going to change their minds. When it comes to people of color in any former colony, whether it be in Africa or in the Caribbean, the British have demonstrated they have no interest in giving you any significant help that will elevate your standard of living and your quality of life, because if they could have done it, well, they could do it, but they won't. So they're not going to change their minds. We have to do like what Barbados have done and build that economy to say, I don't need you to be the head of state anymore. I am cutting ties in terms of being a part of the Commonwealth. If you switch and you go to Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Scotland, some parts of Ireland, you will find that the United Kingdom deal with these territories in a much different way than they deal with territories where people of color reside. You have to do sort of what India did. Now, they cannot defy India because India is very integrated in their society and have proven themselves worthy and smart enough to compete with any Brit, any white Brit. So they are in their parliaments and they are in their boards because they have built themselves up. And that's what we have to do. We have to build ourselves up. We have to free ourselves from all corruption and crime and all of those things. Yes, we cannot be a country that is known for drug running and all of that. That's not who we are. That's not what brought us where we are. And we need not go down that road. But to depend on the British to be a viable partner in this world that we're living, they're not going to do it. We have to do it ourselves.
And how possible do you see that?
It's very possible. Leadership is important. People with integrity must rise up. People who have built businesses. We have this tendency of electing novices who even run a chicken coop to run a country. How can you run a whole country if you haven't run anything? And I'm not saying you must have been a business owner, but you must know something about these processes in business in order to run a country. Because if you have a government, how much people work for the government? 3,000 people? That's your employee pool. What if you are not effective and efficient in delivering services to the population? What do you have to do? Who do you have to retrain? Who do you have to shuffle? Who do you have to... Sometimes you don't have to even lay off people. You just have to repurpose from people. What if some people are bottlenecks, they've been in that position, but everything you try to move forward, they're stifling you. Then have the courage to move them. It's going to take bold, focused leadership. And it's going to take a national agenda, a plan that says, here's where we are, here's where we need to go. We need to have the best healthcare system in the region. We need to have the best electrical grid that wean ourselves off of fossil fuel and become friendly with wind and solar, which we have both of. We need to have a proper educational system in our country where, because if you want to save a nation, you educate a child. We want to have our environment clean, our waters clean, because that is one of our greatest natural resources. That's why people come here. So we have to reopen the ponds so that the sediments can settle and not run into the sea, and clean our air, clean our environment, let our beaches restore themselves, come back blue crystal and pristine waters. We need a whole plan to get us from where we are and the path we are on, that's leading us a road of degradation, to where we want to be. What do you want your roads from East End to West End to King Garden Bay to Seacoast Bay to look like, with proper drainage so there's not proper flooding? I mean, flooding and mashing up your roads every 3 years. You gotta go re-spend and spend. We need direct. Now we know it's a must that we must get direct airlift out of the United States. When I'm in Miami airport, I hear American Airlines flight to St. Kitts, American Airlines flight to St. Martin, American Airlines flight to Montego, American Airlines flight to St. Vincent, American Airlines flight to Trinidad, no American Airlines flight to Tatola. Right? St. Thomas right next door, and they are the #1 destination for travelers coming out of the U.S. in the Caribbean. What is the plan for that? And then make it a national plan that no matter whose government is in power, you have to follow this plan. And get an independent body like the RDA, not because I sit on the board, who will ensure that these things are done over the next 10 to 15 years, that in 30 years you get to your destination. But if you have no plan, you have no direction, then you will never get anywhere. And that's where we have been for the last 20 years. Awesome.
It's on that note, I really have to pull the plug here on the...
But you didn't ask me about the other thing.
Yes, so we'll do it. We'll come back for that in a little bit. But for this edition of The Big Story, you've said what you said. Your conscience is clear, and so is ours. And we thank you for sharing us always very candid. And we want to thank you for tuning in for this edition of The Big Story. I'm Kathy Richards, as always.